but I would have thought in the region of 6 to 8, maybe £10,000.
Really?
Well, it's a marvellous drawing.
I would value at auction between $600,000
Oh my goodness.
and $800,000.
I was hoping I would be wildly exuberant. I am.
Imagine discovering that the portrait hanging in your family's home isn't just an old painting, but a rare masterpiece worth $1 million. Sounds impossible? That's exactly what happened in some of the most unforgettable moments on Antiques Roadshow. Welcome to our channel. Today, we're counting down the rarest and most valuable portrait paintings ever to appear on the show. From astonishing family heirlooms and museum-quality masterpieces to shocking appraisals that left owners speechless, these incredible discoveries prove that priceless treasures can be hiding in plain sight. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more incredible hidden treasure stories. Over the years, Antiques Roadshow experts have become accustomed to seeing priceless treasures arrive in custom cases or carefully wrapped for protection. But at the Birmingham event, one guest walked in carrying a portrait inside a worn-out cardboard box. Even more alarming, he repeatedly slid the painting in and out, allowing the protective foam to rub directly against the painted surface. Realizing that a few more careless movements could permanently damage the artwork, the appraiser immediately stopped him before the situation became any worse.
Finally, I said, get the painting out of that box and stop putting it back in and out of that box before you get it damaged. And he did. And it was more than I could have dreamed of. It was a fabulous late 19th century Remington portrait. You're the first for me. I've never reprimanded a guest for manhandling a painting before.
What made it extraordinary was its creator, Frederic Remington, the legendary artist best known for capturing the spirit of the American West in the late 19th century. The two men had become close friends while living in El Paso in 1896. Accompanying the painting was an original handwritten letter from Remington to Birger. More than simply confirming the painting's authenticity, the letter preserved a deeply personal friendship, transforming the artwork into an important historical record.
And this piece, together with the letter, would be something that I would value at auction between $600,000
Oh my goodness.
and $800,000.
I was hoping I would be wildly exuberant. I am.
Following the appraisal, the family entrusted the portrait to the Birmingham Museum of Art for professional conservation rather than continuing to keep it at home. It proved to be a wise decision. In the years that followed, demand for Western American art continued to climb, and Frederic Remington's paintings became even more desirable among collectors. When the program revisited the portrait in 2019, its updated value far exceeded the original estimate.
The market has gone up for Western art, and the market is still very strong for Remington. And in today's market in 2019, I would value the painting between $800,000 and $1.2 million.
Hidden inside an ordinary cardboard box was not only an extraordinary painting, but also a remarkable story that had survived for more than a century. Yet the next discovery would be even more unbelievable, beginning with a woman who bought an old painting simply because it reminded her of her college days. Sometimes, a purchase made simply because you loved it can quietly change your life decades later. At an Antiques Roadshow event in Albuquerque in 2014, Carol brought in a painting titled The Reply, which she had owned for more than half a century. Looking back on the moment she learned its true value, she still couldn't help laughing because the appraisal exceeded anything she had ever imagined.
I felt like I was in convulsions when you told me what the price was. I was going,
The story began in 1963, when Carol was a third-year college student studying in Madrid, Spain. Living near the Joaquin Sorolla Museum, she happened to come across the unframed portrait and was immediately captivated by its beautiful treatment of light. Without knowing its significance, she decided to buy it. What surprised the experts even more was the identity of the artist. Jane Peterson was one of America's leading female painters of the 20th century, celebrated for her impressionist harbor scenes and colorful coastal landscapes.
Jane Peterson did not really paint figure works like this. Some of her best-known pieces were done on the piers in New England, on Gloucester and areas like that, but she rarely focuses on just one sitter.
Even more astonishing was the price Carol originally paid. As a student, she bought the painting for only $150. More than 50 years later, the appraiser explained that if it were offered through a New York gallery, it could command a price far beyond anything she had ever expected.
You said you purchased it unframed, did you not?
Yes. As I recall, I paid $150 for it.
$150. I think that a gallery in New York would be asking $300,000.
Where's the chair? Now I need that chair.
After the broadcast, the painting's enormous value made Carol and her family uneasy about keeping it at home. Following a conversation with her children, she contacted appraiser Deborah Force to help find the right collector. The sale was successfully completed, with the painting bringing nearly $300,000. The proceeds allowed Carol to buy land, build the home she had always wanted, and enjoy a comfortable retirement. For her, the painting had fulfilled its purpose, while its beauty would continue to be appreciated by future generations.
Jane actually helped me purchase land and build a house where I'm living now.
That's wonderful.
I love the painting, but you can't take it with you. May she live a very long time.
From a painting purchased for just $150 during her college years, the reply ultimately brought Carol a life-changing ending that no one could have predicted. But the next portrait is extraordinary in an entirely different way. Instead of being painted with brushstrokes, it was painstakingly created from thousands of tiny pieces of glass, preserving a powerful story shaped by history itself. At first glance, this piece looks like a traditional oil portrait with soft brushwork and remarkably lifelike expression. But within seconds, the experts realized they were looking at something entirely different. The image was painstakingly assembled from countless tiny pieces of colored glass, creating a masterful micromosaic that only the most skilled artisans could produce. The sheer scale and quality of the workmanship alone were enough to leave the appraiser genuinely amazed.
Well, as you said, it is a micromosaic. The term micromosaic was given in the 20th century to denote this type of artwork, which is literally the introduction or the placement of these tiny little, what we call tesserae, into a ground. So the tesserae, actually, you mentioned ceramic or stone.
Are they stone or
mosaics
are they
stone often. These are neither ceramic or stone. These are actually glass.
The woman portrayed is Beatrice Cenci, whose tragic story became one of the most famous in Italian history. After enduring years of abuse from her own father, she and her stepmother killed him in an attempt to escape their suffering. Both were ultimately sentenced to death, yet Beatrice's beauty and courage transformed her into a lasting artistic icon. Her story inspired the celebrated painter Guido Reni, and years later became the subject of this extraordinary micromosaic.
Beatrice and her stepmother were abused by her father. They murdered him. They were convicted of murder, and ultimately they were both, I don't know if they were hung or how they were killed.
I believe they were beheaded.
Okay, beheaded.
Yeah.
Partly because she's so beautiful, partly because she stood up for her rights.
Micromosaics of this size are exceptionally rare, requiring thousands of tiny glass tesserae to be cut and placed entirely by hand with extraordinary precision. Combined with its powerful historical subject, the piece became one of the most remarkable artworks ever brought to the program.
I would think an insurance valuation of $85,000
Cool.
would be a fair price.
Excellent.
It's an absolutely splendid work of art. I nearly leapt over my colleague to look at this.
From thousands of tiny pieces of glass, the Moglia family preserved one of history's most tragic stories, in a form that is almost impossible to replicate. But next we return to the world of oil painting, where an ordinary-looking portrait concealed a value that stunned even seasoned experts. Sometimes, a painting hanging quietly on a family's wall for decades turns out to be the work of a future legend. This story began in 1945 when the guest's father, a U.S. Navy medical corpsman, became friends with a young sailor named Milton Rauschenberg. During a visit to an art exhibition, the young soldier casually remarked that he could paint something like what they had just seen. A few days later, he returned with this very portrait.
Robert Rauschenberg said, I think I can do that. And so, lo and behold, a few days later, painted my dad's portrait.
At the time, Rauschenberg had not yet become one of the most influential artists of modern art. Before pursuing his artistic career, he served in the psychiatric unit at Camp Pendleton. Because it was created so early, shortly after his military service, this portrait is considered one of the very few surviving works from the beginning of his career.
Two young sailors here. At the top, actually, it even says Milton Ernest, in parentheses, Bob Rauschenberg, the artist.
Yes.
And
what made the painting truly exceptional was not only Robert Rauschenberg's name, but also its remarkably well-preserved provenance. The family had carefully kept wartime photographs together with official documentation from the Robert Rauschenberg Foundation. That uninterrupted chain of evidence confirmed the painting's history, transforming what had once hung beside a $2 picture into a highly desirable work for serious collectors.
it establishes also what we call the provenance of the painting, the history of the painting, which is very, very important for an artist as important as Robert Rauschenberg. This snapshot is of a portrait by Robert Rauschenberg, painted in 1945 and signed by the curator, the head of the Rauschenberg Foundation.
When the appraiser revealed the estimate, the owner could hardly believe what he had just heard. A simple family portrait that had remained in the house for years turned out to be an authentic work by a celebrated artist, worth thousands of times more than anyone had imagined.
I would put a conservative auction estimate of $40,000 to $60,000 on it.
Holy cow, are you kidding me? I guess it was worth more than that $2 picture right next to it. Oh, amazing.
Sometimes, the greatest value of a painting lies not only in the artist who created it, but also in the story that has preserved it across generations. Next, we'll discover a completely different kind of portrait, where extraordinary craftsmanship is found not on a large canvas, but inside miniature works of art of astonishing precision. Not every artwork that stops an appraiser in their tracks is worth millions of dollars. Sometimes, a few strokes of colored chalk on paper are enough to leave a lasting impression. At Antiques Roadshow, a guest brought in a family drawing that had been carefully passed down through generations. From the very first glance, the appraiser recognized several distinctive features associated with Richard Cosway, the celebrated 18th century British master of portrait miniatures.
This is a drawing by Richard Cosway, who was an 18th century British artist. The subject matter is his wife, Maria Cosway.
Richard Cosway is possibly one of England's greatest portrait miniaturists.
The woman portrayed is believed to be Maria Cosway, the artist's wife and longtime muse. Unlike the formal aristocratic portraits of the period, complete with elaborate powdered wigs, she appears in a remarkably natural and intimate pose. Using only red and white chalk, the artist captured a penetrating gaze, delicate highlights, and softly modeled lips, giving the drawing the feeling of a genuine moment preserved on paper rather than a formal commission.
This is an 18th century woman. She's seen without her wig. You see up here just the hair coming down, cascading across it, just very informal, immediate, close.
Even so, the true authorship still leaves room for debate. The signature may have been added later by a collector as an ownership mark, something not uncommon on historic drawings. Even if that proves to be the case, the exceptional artistic quality convinced the expert that the work came from a painter of the highest caliber, a conclusion reflected in its estimated value.
If this were Cosway and his Maria Cosway, so I would think you estimate this at auction for about $10,000 to $20,000. Now, if it's the other possibility that it's by a continental artist, such as a Maurice Quentin de la Tour or someone like that, who's even better, you might be looking at $30,000 to $40,000.
What made this drawing truly remarkable was not simply its market value, but the emotion it carried. For the owner, it was a treasured family heirloom that had been lovingly preserved by a relative for many years. For the appraiser, it ranked among the most moving drawings he had ever examined, proving that the enduring power of great art often extends far beyond any appraisal figure. Some portraits preserve far more than a person's likeness, they preserve the history of an entire family. The guest brought to Antiques Roadshow a watercolor that had been discovered inside her late grandmother's trunk. For many years, she had assumed it was the work of an unknown male artist who had once traveled through Connecticut. But from the very beginning of the appraisal, the expert revealed a completely unexpected truth.
This is a fascinating watercolor. You said, I'd like to know more about him as the artist, is that it's not a him.
Oh, it's not?
It's not. It's a she.
Oh.
And the artist's name is Jane Anthony Davis.
The artist was Jane Anthony Davis, a portrait painter born in Rhode Island in 1821. At a time when portrait painting was largely dominated by men, she traveled from town to town creating portraits for ordinary families. Before photography became widely available, works like these served as the primary way families preserved the faces of one generation for the next.
What's really nice about this particular Davis is you've got the mother and her baby girl and her husband, and there's the mother-in-law right there, Elizabeth Fisk.
What makes this group of portraits especially remarkable is how much information has survived with them. The artwork includes the names of every subject, the town where it was painted, the exact completion date, and Jane Anthony Davis's signature, all written in elegant calligraphy. Together with later photographs of the same family taken in Nebraska, the portraits form an exceptionally complete family record that has survived to the present day.
And what's really nice about this one is not only that it's 3 generations, but it's fully inscribed. Beautiful calligraphy, which shows the names of the subjects. There's the name of the town in which they were painted, the date, August the 9th, 1845. And here's the artist's signature, J.A. Davis.
The appraisal did more than establish the value of a rare group of portraits. It also restored Jane Anthony Davis to her rightful place in the history of American art. For the owner, the greatest reward was not simply the estimated value of $25,000 to $35,000, but the chance to rediscover and preserve her family's story nearly 2 centuries after it was first painted.
I know, most people don't. So, I guess the only piece of the puzzle that's missing right now is the value. This unusual triple portrait and the single portrait would be $25,000 to $35,000.
That's very nice.
With the quiet beauty of Jane Anthony Davis's watercolors, our journey through some of the most valuable portrait discoveries on Antiques Roadshow comes to an end. Every artwork told a different story, yet they all shared the same enduring truth. The greatest value of art lies not only in its price, but in its ability to preserve memories, families, and history across generations. Behind many old portraits lies the story of someone who once lived in the spotlight. The guest brought to Antiques Roadshow a painting of her grandmother, Clara Galassi, a silent film actress who performed across Europe under the stage name Dolly Gray. According to the family, the portrait was painted in Paris during the 1920s, when she was at the height of her career and enjoying some of the happiest years of her life.
This is a portrait that was of my grandmother. Her name was Clara Galassi. She was in movies in Europe, and her stage name was Dolly Gray. This was painted in Paris, I think in the 1920s. The artist is Tade Styka.
The artist was Tade Styka, a Polish painter born into one of the country's most distinguished artistic families. He became well known for portraying politicians, writers, and prominent public figures of his era. In this portrait, Styka did far more than capture Dolly Gray's appearance. Through her hair, expressive eyes, and confident pose, he conveyed the unmistakable presence of a silent film star at the peak of her fame.
He was a Polish artist born in Poland in 1889, and he was born into a family of artists. His father was Jan Styka, his brother was Adam Styka.
The painting has become even more desirable as the market for Polish art has grown significantly in recent years. As a member of the celebrated Styka family, Tade's works have attracted increasing attention from collectors, transforming this portrait from a treasured family keepsake into a valuable work of art with strong appeal in today's market.
Polish art is growing in value, and especially this is kind of a Polish art dynasty, if you will, with the father and the 2 sons. So the most recent high auction records for paintings by Tade Styka have been in Poland, and his real name is Tadeusz Styka. The painting itself is oil on board. I would feel very comfortable putting an auction estimate of $12,000 to $18,000 on the painting.
Okay, wonderful.
If you were going to insure this painting, I would say to insure it for around $30,000.
I see, okay.
Today, the portrait continues to preserve Dolly Gray exactly as she appeared during the brightest chapter of her acting career. For her family, it remains a cherished reminder of an extraordinary grandmother. For the experts, it represents the remarkable intersection of film history, portrait art, and the legacy of one of Poland's most celebrated artistic families, all preserved in a single painting. Not every wedding gift carries a piece of art history with it. The guest brought to Antiques Roadshow a watercolor titled Quartier Saint-Hilaire, a painting that renowned artist Loïïs Mailou Jones personally gave to her grandson as a wedding present in 1977. Although the work had been painted 3 decades earlier in Paris, its vibrant colors also tell the story of an artist who overcame racial barriers to become one of the most influential African-American painters of the 20th century.
She spoke about often that she had to submit her paintings anonymously.
Correct.
Because of the racial barrier. Did she ever talk to you about something like that?
She talked about that time and the situation, that's what she called it. Oftentimes in Boston, she had to have a white friend submit the painting, and she would go to the exhibit to see people talking about her painting, not knowing that she had done it, and get high accolades and praise for her painting, but never could show her face.
Before receiving widespread recognition, Jones worked as a textile designer in Boston and was often forced to hide her identity simply to have her work judged fairly. Everything changed when she traveled to Paris in 1937. For the first time, she was able to create art in an environment where race was no longer a barrier. That experience transformed not only her artistic style, but also the direction of her entire career.
Paris, as I understand it, 1937 was the first time she went there.
Correct.
But she just raved about the experience of being somewhere where race wasn't an issue.
Very important to her. It gave her the freedom to be who she was.
Alongside her success as a painter, Loïïs Mailou Jones spent many years teaching at Howard University, inspiring generations of young artists. That makes this watercolor significant not only for its artistic quality, but also because it was personally chosen by the artist as a wedding gift for a beloved family member, giving the painting an even deeper personal meaning.
Yeah, I think that she thought enough of it to select it as a wedding present for you. I think it's really kind of a nice additional point to it. So I would say this painting is probably worth around $25,000 retail.
With a retail value of around $25,000, Quartier Saint-Hilaire represents far more than the success of an accomplished painter. It tells the story of perseverance, extraordinary talent, and the determination to overcome prejudice in pursuit of artistic recognition. It also provides a fitting conclusion to our journey through some of the most remarkable portrait paintings and artistic treasures ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. Not every portrait passed down through generations is appreciated from the very beginning. In this family, the painting was simply known as the scary portrait. For decades, it hung in a back room of the family's summer home in Rhode Island, where the children did their best to avoid the unsettling gaze of the two figures. Over time, the painting faded into the background, becoming an old family heirloom that few people wanted to talk about.
It's known as the scary portrait. When I grew up, this was in our summer house in a back room. It wasn't presented to everybody because we were all scared of it.
Only after the experts examined it did the painting's true significance begin to emerge. It portrays a brother and sister from a prosperous family, most likely dating to the 1870s or 1880s. What makes it especially remarkable is that the older sister is shown with her wooden crutches, a detail her parents deliberately chose to include rather than hide. During the Victorian era, this was an unusually compassionate decision, reflecting their acceptance, love, and pride in their daughter.
The thing that I love about it is their faces are so animated. And if you look at the room setting and just the way they're dressed, I would say the date is probably the 1870s, maybe the 1880s.
Although the identity of the artist remains unknown, the quality of the work far surpasses that of many American folk paintings from the same period. The painter handled the children's faces, hands, and expressions with remarkable skill, creating a portrait that is far more emotionally powerful than its simple appearance suggests. That alone made it one of the most memorable discoveries ever featured on Antiques Roadshow, and the painting's true value would leave almost anyone completely stunned.
It's just a fabulous thing, and a conservative auction estimate would be $6,000 to $8,000, and we think for insurance purposes it probably would be around $15,000.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
What was once the painting that frightened every child in the house eventually became one of the family's greatest treasures. Its importance lies not only in its appraisal or artistic craftsmanship, but also in the deeply human story it has preserved for more than a century. Sometimes, the most unforgettable part of a portrait is not the face it captures, but the love and acceptance it quietly carries across generations. Sometimes, the greatest value of a painting has less to do with the canvas itself than with the artist who created it. The guest who brought this landscape to Antiques Roadshow owned not only a 1,937 painting by Birger Sandzén, but also a personal memory of studying under the artist during a summer art class in 1946. Of all the lessons he learned, one brief piece of advice stayed with him for the rest of his life. It was simple, direct, and perfectly captured Sandzén's philosophy as a painter. That same philosophy would eventually become one of the defining features that set his work apart from countless other American landscape artists.
And the painting that I was doing was of a donkey, and he looked at it and he said, "More paint." And that was basically his idea, was to put more paint on anything you painted.
Born in Sweden before moving to Kansas to teach at Bethany College, Birger Sandzén followed a very different path from many artists of his era. While others embraced movements such as cubism and abstraction, he remained devoted to painting the American landscape. Yet what truly distinguished his work was not the scenery itself, but the way he applied color. Thick, energetic layers of paint gave his landscapes remarkable depth and movement, creating a style that collectors immediately recognized. Looking closely at the surface of this painting, it becomes easy to understand why Sandzén gradually earned a reputation unlike anyone else in American art.
Sandzén, as I'm sure you know, was born in Sweden and moved to Lindsborg, Kansas in 1894 to teach at Bethany College. And like other artists in the region, like Thomas Hart Benton and Grant Wood, Midwestern artists, he was aware of more avant-garde movements like cubism or futurism and modern trends like abstraction.
Sandzén became famous for his heavy impasto technique, building paint so thick that the texture almost seemed sculpted. His bold approach even earned him the nickname the American Van Gogh, although he personally rejected any major influence from the Dutch master. Ironically, it took decades before the art market fully appreciated just how distinctive his work really was. So when the appraiser finally revealed what this landscape could bring at auction, the owner realized that the unforgettable advice, "more paint," had become part of the story behind a remarkably valuable painting.
And because of his unusual technique of painting, he was sort of nicknamed the American Van Gogh, but the artist always disclaimed any great influence of Van Gogh. I think at auction this might bring as much as $30,000 to $50,000.
Oops.
From a devoted teacher to one of America's most recognizable landscape painters, Birger Sandzén proved that truly original styles sometimes need time before the world catches up with them. His 1,937 landscape captures not only the beauty of the American countryside, but also the artistic philosophy that guided his entire career. And like so many remarkable treasures featured on Antiques Roadshow, the greatest surprise was never what appeared on the surface, but the extraordinary story and value waiting to be discovered decades later. Sometimes, a decision that seems reckless at the time turns out to be the best investment of a lifetime. The guest on Antiques Roadshow recalled that in 1985, while working as a young chef in Washington, D.C., he decided to buy an artwork on an installment plan for $1,100. For him, it was a significant amount of money. Still, something about the piece convinced him it was worth the risk. Then, just 1 week after making his first payment, an unexpected event transformed his purchase into something far more remarkable. It was the moment when the artist behind the painting suddenly found himself in the national spotlight, and the owner's leap of faith began to look surprisingly well-timed.
He also did the cover of Talking Heads album called Little Creatures, and I paid my first payment, and then the next week, that album came out.
And who are we talking about here?
Howard Finster.
Howard Finster,
That's
okay.
right.
Finster was a visionary artist, and he was out there.
The artist was Howard Finster, a self-taught painter and preacher who believed God had given him a mission to create art. At his famous Paradise Garden in Georgia, he spent decades building a colorful world unlike anything else in American folk art, attracting musicians such as REM and Talking Heads. Finster also believed he had been instructed to complete an enormous number of artworks during his lifetime, which is why he carefully numbered every piece he created.
Finster had received another vision that he was to make 5,000 works of art, and that's why he started numbering them. And he continued to work until he died in 2001.
Yeah.
So no one knows absolutely how many works of art Finster did, but it's probably in excess of 45 or 50,000.
That extraordinary dedication would eventually become one of the defining features of his legacy. This painting perfectly reflects Finster's unmistakable style, with its surface filled with vibrant colors, symbolic imagery, and handwritten religious messages. For years, his unconventional approach kept him outside the traditional art world. Ironically, that same originality is what later made collectors eager to own his work. As the appraisal reached its conclusion, the owner realized that the money he had risked nearly 40 years earlier had grown into something far beyond anything he had imagined.
Most of his work, his small dimensional work, is either measured in the few hundreds to $1,500, $2,000. In the right outsider art auction, I think this would probably bring between $15,000 and $25,000.
Really? That's great.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Great. Good for Howard.
From a young chef's installment purchase to a painting worth tens of thousands of dollars, this story shows that the true value of art is often recognized only years after it is created. For Howard Finster, fame and financial success were never the ultimate goal. His lifelong mission was simply to keep creating and sharing his faith through every painting. In the end, that unwavering dedication established him as one of the most influential outsider artists in American history. Some portraits spend generations hanging quietly in family homes, with no one realizing they are connected to some of the biggest names in art history. The guest on Antiques Roadshow brought in a painting that had been passed down through the family for many years. It had always been treasured as a meaningful heirloom, but no one imagined that both the subject of the portrait and the artist behind it would immediately capture the attention of the experts. Within minutes of the appraisal, what seemed like an ordinary family keepsake began revealing a remarkable story that no one in the family had expected.
That's the name of the actor?
Yeah, Danjuro was a Japanese actor, very famous, renowned. It's by Mortimer Menpes, and it was given by Menpes to Sir Henry Irving.
The English actor?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was in 1898.
The man in the portrait is Danjuro, one of the most celebrated kabuki actors in Japanese history. The artist was Mortimer Menpes, a leading figure of Britain's aesthetic movement. What makes the piece especially unusual is that Menpes designed not only the painting, but also its frame. The finely carved decorative corners and the distinctive textured edges transform the frame into an essential part of the artwork rather than a simple border. Together, they create a unified design that immediately distinguishes the portrait from many others of its period.
Mortimer Menpes, the artist, was a most interesting person. You'd say he was a central figure of the English aesthetic movement. Menpes designed his own frames, and here's an example of one of the nicest I've seen. It's got these wonderful designs in the corner, and this very typical of him, this striated edges to bring the picture out.
The painting also carries an extraordinary history. It was originally presented as a gift between two celebrated figures of the stage, later appeared at auction, and eventually remained in the family's collection for more than a century. Yet its true significance extends far beyond that remarkable provenance. According to the appraiser, the portrait's dramatic composition, powerful visual impact, and mature style represent Menpes at his very best. As the valuation was finally revealed, it far exceeded anything the owner had expected.
And I would put really quite a high value for a late Menpes on this picture, simply because of its extreme drama and its great power. I mean, this picture is going to sock you in the eye from the end of the longest room, isn't it? The minute you walk in the door, it's going to impress. £12,000.
Right.
From a treasured family heirloom to a highly valued work of art, this portrait proves that an object's true importance often emerges only after its full story is uncovered. It preserves not only the image of one of Japan's greatest stage legends, but also the craftsmanship of one of Britain's most accomplished artists of the late 19th century. Like so many unforgettable discoveries on Antiques Roadshow, its greatest surprise had been quietly waiting to be revealed for generations. Some hidden treasures are never discovered in museums or prestigious auction houses. Instead, they turn up in places where no one would think to look. This painting was found in a trash pile beside an old barn during the guest's father's cross-country road trip in the 1960s. As an artist himself, he felt there was something worth saving, even though no one knew what the painting really was. He rescued it, brought it home, and for decades, it quietly remained tucked away inside a family closet. It wasn't until it appeared on Antiques Roadshow that its remarkable story finally began to unfold.
And Dad saw this old barn or dilapidated building of some sort that had a trash pile, and he could see this painting in the trash pile. Dad was an artist, so he thought it was interesting, and he stopped and picked this up, put it in the car, and they went on about their road trip.
The appraiser quickly identified the artist as John Ray, an illustrator who studied under Howard Pyle and became known for his deep fascination with Alice in Wonderland. Believing that Lewis Carroll's two famous books still left room for more adventures, Ray went on to write and illustrate The New Adventures of Alice. That same imagination is reflected in this painting, which combines familiar elements from Alice's world in an original way. Ray even incorporated real playing cards into the composition using collage techniques, giving the work a distinctive style that set it apart from most literary illustrations of its era. It was exactly those unusual details that caught the expert's attention.
He also wrote and illustrated children's books, and he did write a book about Alice. He seemed to be somewhat obsessed with Alice, I think. He felt that the two books written by Lewis Carroll, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, just weren't enough. So he wrote this book called The New Adventures of Alice.
Although John Ray never became as famous as illustrators like John Tenniel or artists such as Salvador Dali, his work has earned lasting respect among collectors for its creativity and historical significance. Yet the most unforgettable part of this story wasn't the artist's name. It was the realization that a painting once abandoned beside a road was about to be valued far beyond what anyone could have imagined.
I think in a retail setting, the asking price might be around $10,000.
Wow.
Not bad for something rescued from the
Not
trash.
bad, not bad for the trash, no. Yeah, that's surprising, wow. Wow, yeah, didn't know.
From a discarded painting rescued from a trash pile to a work valued at around $10,000, this journey proves that extraordinary discoveries sometimes begin in the most unlikely places. Had the guest's father not stopped the car that day and decided to save it, a small but meaningful piece of Alice in Wonderland history might have disappeared forever. And like so many remarkable treasures featured on Antiques Roadshow, the greatest surprise was never the painting itself, it was the hidden story waiting decades to be uncovered. Not every inexpensive purchase stays inexpensive forever. The guest brought in a collection of watercolor illustrations that he and a friend had purchased together years earlier. They split the collection evenly, each keeping 22 works, and paid only about £400 for all of them. At the time, they simply thought they had found an interesting collectible. But after only a few minutes of examination, the appraiser realized these watercolors were far more significant than they appeared. And what made them so valuable had very little to do with their age alone.
Now, how much did you pay for them?
Well, I bought them with a friend of mine.
Right.
He has 22, I have 22, and
right.
We paid about £400.
The artist behind the collection was Edward Donovan, one of the leading natural history illustrators of the early 19th century. What sets his work apart is the remarkable balance between scientific accuracy and artistic skill. From the nearly transparent wings of butterflies to the carefully rendered leaves, stems, and plants, every detail was painted with extraordinary precision. These are far more than beautiful illustrations. They are valuable historical records that preserve the natural world long before photography made such documentation possible. It is this rare combination of art and science that has kept Donovan's work highly respected by collectors.
Not only are the butterflies fabulous, but the backgrounds and the leaves and the nettles and all the rest of it are just absolutely incredible. And look at the translucence of this one, you can actually see through that.
According to the appraiser, the collection's importance comes not only from its beauty, but also from the fact that these works have survived in such excellent condition for more than 2 centuries. Complete groups like this rarely appear on the market. And when the valuation was finally revealed, the owner realized that the modest purchase he had made years earlier had turned into something far more extraordinary than he had ever expected.
Well, I think you're 22. It's such a pity to break them up in many ways, but you're 22 are worth in the region of £10,000. That's what I mean. You must go and try and buy the other ones back.
From a £400 purchase to a collection valued at around £10,000, this story proves that remarkable discoveries sometimes begin with the most ordinary finds. Through these watercolor illustrations, Edward Donovan preserved not only the beauty of butterflies and plants, but also the spirit of scientific discovery during an extraordinary period of history. And like so many treasures featured on Antiques Roadshow, their true value remained hidden until someone with the right knowledge recognized exactly what they were. Sometimes, a chance meeting can leave a legacy that lasts for generations. In 1944, during the Second World War, the guest's father-in-law, a marine engineer, was forced to stay in Port Glasgow while his ship was being repaired. At the boarding house, he struck up a friendship with an unusual man. For nearly 2 months, they spent their evenings talking together, never imagining that this quiet companion was Stanley Spencer, one of Britain's most celebrated painters. Then, on one ordinary evening, that friendship led to a portrait the family would treasure for decades.
Stanley Spencer was at the same lodging house.
Did they become great friends? I mean, they were together for 2 months?
Yes, they did.
They became friends?
They got on very well with him, and he told them all about his life in Cook.
One evening, while the 2 men were sitting together in the boarding house parlor, Spencer suddenly asked if he could sketch his new friend. In just a short sitting, he created a remarkably lifelike portrait that captured not only the engineer's appearance, but also his character. For the family, the drawing became much more than an artwork. It preserved the image of a relative that later generations would never have the chance to meet, while also telling the story of an unexpected friendship born in the middle of wartime.
And they were sitting one evening in this parlour, and he said, "Sit down, Jack, and I'll draw you."
Wonderful.
Yes.
So was that done in an evening?
Yes.
Over the years, Stanley Spencer came to be recognized as one of the greatest figures in British art, with many of his masterpieces selling for millions of pounds. Although this portrait was created as a personal sketch rather than a museum piece, it clearly displays Spencer's unmistakable style and carries significant artistic value. Still, the moment everyone was waiting for was the appraisal, because the owner had never imagined that such a personal family keepsake could be worth so much.
Stanley Spencer paintings at last are getting their due recognition, and a great masterpiece could be over £1 million today. But I would have thought in the region of 6 to 8, maybe £10,000.
Really?
Well, it's a marvellous drawing by, he's a very important artist.
That is a shock. I had no idea, none at all.
From a chance friendship during wartime to a portrait valued at thousands of pounds, this story proves that life's simplest moments can sometimes create the most enduring treasures. For the family, it remains the memory of a beloved relative. For collectors, it is an authentic work by Stanley Spencer. And like so many remarkable discoveries on Antiques Roadshow, its greatest value lies not only in the artist's name, but in the extraordinary story that has preserved the portrait for more than half a century.